Good morning. Thank you very much, Jeff. That was a wonderful presentation, and now we'll have a chance to hear from our panelists. I would like to invite our panelists to come up and take their seats to my left. My name is Beth Gamse, and I am a member of the MBAE Board of Directors, and I, in my day job, work at Abt Associates doing educational research about a number of different programs, perhaps including the Common Core. But what I'm going to focus on first is this morning remind you that the bios for all of the panelists, for Dianne Kelly, for Greg, for Karene-sean, and for Julia, are included in the packets that you have. And shortly, I'm just going to make a couple of remarks, we'll have a chance to find out about the translation of the macro point of view that Jeff has laid out to what it means in the day-to-day details for individuals who are going to be responsible for enacting this transition. As many of you probably know, MBAE has worked with the Rennie Center on multiple issues over time, and in particular on thinking about the Common Core. Today is the first of several different forums that we will be focusing attention on about how the Common Core standards, state standards, will affect education in Massachusetts specifically. MBAE has been working in standards-based reform in this state for nearly 2 decades, from the Education Reform Act of 1993 to our recent work on the Common Core. And as Jeff noted in his remarks, when the state was in the process of assessing whether and how to make the transition to the Common Core state standards, MBAE worked with a group called WestEd to do an independent analysis of the Common Core standards relative to Massachusetts' efforts to develop standards. The analysis and side-by-side comparison is on the MBAE website, if any of you are interested in looking at that. And that reveals a number of interesting features, including some things that may now be much more apparent. The Common Core was as good as what the Massachusetts standards would have moved toward, and improved upon what Massachusetts was moving toward in a number of areas, in such key features as college and career readiness. And that's one of the themes that Jeff talked about. Strategic thinking, persuasive writing in particular, and comprehension of text, technical manuals, nonfiction text, the kinds of texts that we need in a knowledge-based economy in today's 21st century. Because of the analysis of the standards that WestEd helped to carry out, MBAE and a number of other business organizations across the state supported the adoption of the Common Core state standards. Now we're committed to working with the Rennie Center and with members of this audience and others to explore how can we capitalize on this opportunity that we have to align our education, align the curriculum, align the assessments over the coming years. This morning we have an assembled panel of outstanding educators who are involved from a number of different perspectives in the implementation of the Common Core at the district, school, classroom, and statewide levels. Since you already have their bios, I'm not going to go into the specific accomplishments each one of our panelists has to his or her credit, but I would like to start by asking people to react to Jeff's comments. Everyone has been asked to speak for several minutes. After that time, I'll ask a few questions, and we will have some additional time for questions from the audience. So I would like to begin with Dianne, who is seated to my immediate left, and she will start with her perspective sitting somewhere in the district. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. As Jeff mentioned, I was fortunate to work on a couple of different committees at the state level as we were having the discussion around Common Core and whether or not to adopt, and if we did adopt, what changes we wanted to make. So I feel very close to the Common Core, particularly for mathematics, which is my area of expertise and the area that I worked with the state team on for Common Core. And my initial reaction is I'm very excited. I think that the Common Core represents a change in a very positive direction for us in mathematics education, and from the colleagues I've spoken to in the English department, it's positive change in that direction as well. So I'm really excited about that, and I guess my charge today is to talk a little bit about, at the district level, what are the next steps and what are we going to do? How do we make this happen in Revere or whatever district you're all from? So I just want to talk a little bit about what we're doing at the district level in Revere and the conversations that we're having there. First, we're excited that the department is actually going to help us this time around with developing pacing guides and curriculum maps, the things that we spent 3 or 4 years developing when we first adopted the last set of frameworks. That's exciting because it won't be a redundancy of work happening across the 351 districts in the state. So we're really holding on hard and fast to that, and we're looking forward to using the documents that the state puts forward rather than starting that initiative on our own this time. And what we're focusing on right now at both the administrative and the classroom level is familiarizing teachers and administrators with the content of the standards themselves and starting those conversations about, well, what exactly does this mean? And we're already seeing evidence of the clarity in the new Common Core standards where teachers have fewer questions about exactly what different standards are going to look like in the classroom and what their instruction is going to look like for different students with different kinds of needs. So that's very exciting also. We have a plan for next year. We're anticipating some of the state documents will come out in the meantime or in the course of next year. So our plan for next year is to focus all of our professional development around Common Core. That will include the district level director meetings, the district, whole district professional development day that we do each year in September. Principals will conduct building level discussions in their principal meetings, and the entire administrative team will be trained through our cabinet meetings that we have monthly. All of those meetings, obviously there'll be other things we need to talk about, but all of those meetings will have at least a component that discusses Common Core, the content of Common Core, implementation of Common Core, and that's how we hope to get that information out. We've recognized one gap area in that, and that is with our assistant principals and vice principals who don't attend cabinet meetings. They typically take charge of the buildings while the principals attend the cabinet meetings. So we're raising that gap, we're raising the knowledge of that gap to ensure that principals are able to go back and train their assistants and their vice principals in order to make sure they're included in the conversation. We've also invited specifically principals and vice principals. Everybody's always invited to director meetings, but everybody's very busy. So we're specifically putting it out to them for next year. Come to these meetings so that you can understand Common Core and the contents of the standards, because we're going to expect you to look for these things when you go into teachers and conduct evaluations when you're in the classroom. So we're trying to connect those pieces as well. I think that's about it. One other thing that's on our radar for next year is bringing the information to parents and other stakeholders. We've already had conversations with our school committee. We've been keeping them posted as the department informs us about changes in MCAS and things of that nature. We've been keeping the school committee informed, trying to keep everybody up to date with all the information that we have. But that's the key thing, is really putting that plan in for how to disseminate the information to all of the different stakeholders from the district level perspective.
Thank you. Greg,
Great,
please.
thank you. My name is Greg Myers. I'm the principal of Quaboag Regional Middle High School in Warren, Mass. And just in case you didn't bring your maps with you, that is Warren, Mass. Is on the border of central and western Massachusetts, not far from Springfield. I'm very pleased to be able to share my perspective, not only as a 7 through 12 building administrator, but also as a member of a region in central and western Mass that is just, their awareness of the new standards is just emerging. And I'd like to address that first. I think that sessions like this are valuable, and I think that I speak for my colleagues in my part of Massachusetts in saying that we need many more of them. I think that there is a very lively debate in my district and in surrounding districts as to whether the new standards will actually be required. I know that Todd Smola, Representative Smola from Palmer, near where I teach, where I'm a principal, has introduced legislation to recall the Common Core. In my part of the state, it's a lively debate as to whether this will actually come to fruition. The downside of this is that we're wasting time, and that I think the implementation timeline is fairly aggressive, and I think every day counts. And the more time that districts, in my perception, waste debating whether or not they're going to be held accountable to these standards, the further behind they're going to fall. Now, having said that, I think the next challenge that I think my colleagues face is deepening their understanding of what the new curriculum standards will mean for them. In a few conversations I've had with my colleagues, when I talk about the Common Core, they think that I am talking about Mass Core. I don't know that they necessarily understand what's coming. I don't know that they're necessarily engaged in this conversation. So I think education is key on this point. And I know that the Readiness Center and I know MSSAA is doing valuable service in educating my colleagues, educating superintendents and school committees on what this will mean for them. In my building, this conversation has already begun. And to a large extent, my teachers are embracing it, well, I'm pleased to say, for many of the same reasons that I think Dianne outlined. Number one, I think that my English department chair, my AP English teachers, my entire English department is very happy and relieved to know that literacy will become the responsibility of all teachers. And I personally, as a recovering English teacher, agree wholeheartedly. I think that my math department is embracing this. I think that my science and technology department, I think everyone across the board in my building, they're eager to have this conversation. And I have to say, the silver lining in all of this, there are two promises. First, our students, my students, will be better prepared for the day after graduation. And let the chips fall where they may. That's my goal, and I think I share that goal with many of you. I think too many of my students are going on to college and taking remedial courses. Too many of them are taking remedial math and writing courses that they don't need to be wasting their time and money on. Secondly, I feel strongly that any time spent with teachers talking about the written curriculum and comparing that to their taught curriculum is time well spent. And I think we can't do that enough. Too often school districts, and I'm guilty of this more than anyone, leave that conversation for right before NEAS comes to visit. And I think that's an injustice to our students, because a curriculum that's on a shelf that's dusty isn't doing anyone any good. And of course, I also want to share my superintendent and school committee's concern, and their number one concern is, what's this going to cost us? I think in my part of the state, there's a healthy debate. Some people are putting out information that, well, with the new curriculum comes new textbooks. And the real winner in all of this will be the textbook companies. And now we have to throw away all of our old textbooks and adopt new textbooks. I know that nothing could be further from the truth there. But having said that, my English department especially is concerned about supplemental materials so that they can prepare their kids. And finally, we have spent a good deal of time, and I'm sure I speak for many districts when I say we've spent a good deal of time fine-tuning our curriculum to prepare our students for success on the MCAS. And we use MCAS results as feedback. We spend a lot of PD, and even more PD will be spent on evaluating this data. As we change the curriculum and as we change the assessment, we'll need more time to fine-tune. And I think there may be a perception among some of my teachers, certainly, although I'm very pleasantly surprised at how they're embracing this, that here we go again. The goalposts are moving. The goalposts are changing. We're just now all set, and we're just now seeing some results after struggling, and they're changing the rules. It's my job to combat that perception, but the perception is still there. And just to wrap up very briefly, I would like to express my concern at the aggressiveness of the timeline. I think that as we move towards the new assessment, and I understand, it's my understanding that there will be an MCAS a transitional test, and then finally a Common Core test. I'm concerned about transitioning each of those 3 cohorts of students. I'm concerned especially about students who may need to retest, and which test will they be given. My teachers have a lot of valid questions about this, and I look forward to more information. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Karene-sean.
Good morning. I'm Karene-sean Hines, and I'm an 8th grade ELA teacher at the James P. Timilty Middle School in Roxbury. And because of that, I come here with very particular concerns. Let me begin. 45% of my students do not speak English as their first language at home. In our school, over 25% of the students are identified being on IEPs, individual educational plans. In my school, virtually all of the students qualify for free and reduced lunch. That means, right then and there, they have particular needs, especially when it comes to the Common Core standards and the assessments. My students have traditionally done well. Students in my classroom, they've done well on the MCAS. But that's because I've taken the time as an individual to go in, investigate the MCAS, ask questions of the people who are really knowledgeable, who can understand, okay, this is how the test is pulled together, this is what's actually being tested. I'm a teacher whose standards are posted, the ELA standards are posted right above my board. That is not the case with the majority of teachers in the school where I teach, or in the district where I teach, or even the teachers who I meet as I am involved in various activities in this region and in the state. Long and short of it is that there is an uneven implementation as to how the standards are being viewed, taught, assessed in each of the classrooms. Yes, there's the MCAS. And that's why the MCAS is so important, because it is our one statewide assessment that really says, okay, this is what's going on. This is how teachers are doing vis-a-vis how well they're able to teach their students what needs to be on the test. So right there, there's some issues that we need to deal with. 3 issues. The new assessment, are teachers even aware that there is going to be a new assessment? Well, I can tell you, a lot of them, they've heard rumors of a new assessment. They have no idea. They have no idea of this timeline, and it is very aggressive. They don't know. The next thing, PD. Where's the professional development going to come from to teach us about the new assessment, about the new standards, and to show us that, you know what, we're not throwing out the baby with the bathwater, that in fact, these new standards are what we should have been teaching all along in our classrooms. And third, fairness or equity. How is it fair to my students, to the students who come from some of the more challenging environments? How is it fair to them to have the tests rolled out in a manner that their teachers don't know necessarily that there is even going to be a new test? The teachers might or might not have professional development to prepare them to teach what they're supposed to teach, the way they're supposed to teach it. And then for the kids, what happens if they don't do well on that interim test? And then all of a sudden, the next year, oops, there might be a test with materials that have never been covered. How do we ensure that there's that fairness for our teachers, for our students? And my goodness, how can we then hold everybody accountable. When right now, there's this unevenness. So I'm here, I don't want to sound too pessimistic, but that's my reality. I mean, when I go back and I teach my classes this afternoon, my kids will be pretty well prepared for the assessment that's coming up at the end of next month, our MCAS, our ELA MCAS. But I can't say that for all of the students. And I'll stay on top of the standards as they get rolled out. But can we really say that for all of the students in Massachusetts? I don't think so. So it's so important for us to have teachers in the classroom, you know, perhaps to have a forum like this later on during the day, invite teachers, because we're excited. I want you to know, there are people like me. I am so excited about the new standards. I love MCAS. Yes, I'm one of the few. I was telling Julia this morning. I love MCAS, absolutely love it. And I want to be part of the process for change. And they're more like me. We all want to be part of a positive change for all of our students.
Thank you, Karene-sean. Julia.
I'm Julia Phelps, and I'm the Executive Director for the Center for Curriculum and Instruction. And when thinking about the opportunities that adoption of the Common Core and our new Massachusetts curriculum frameworks presents for us, it's really exciting work. Even though I'm at the department now, those of my colleagues from the department will know that on a regular basis I say I'm putting on my district hat, or I'm putting on my principal hat, or I'm putting on my teacher hat, because like Greg, I never thought of myself as a recovering English teacher, but I guess we are exactly that. So seeing this work from those different perspectives, I know the opportunities that this presents. I also know the challenges. The standards are just the beginning. It's the work that we're going to be doing to make the standards real in classrooms, so that they're not documents that are put on the shelves that are only looked at when we get the MCAS results back and we say, oh, our students did lousy on that standard, we need to go and teach that. That's after the fact. So being able to take these documents and make them real and say, what would this particular standard look like in a classroom with third graders? What would this standard, what would we be doing as teachers? What would students be doing as learners if we made this particular standard real in a classroom? That's the exciting work that we're embarking on. And I see this as an opportunity. I have a family that live in Arkansas, and so the thought that, you know, my nephews and nieces in Arkansas are going to have the same opportunities that the students in Massachusetts have, that's exciting. And I think that's the work that the opportunity that adoption of these new frameworks present for us. We know, as Jeff said, that in the past, as a state, we developed really great standards. We had excellent assessments under Jeff's leadership. But there was that middle part that we just made an assumption that schools and districts and teachers were going to be able to do that work themselves. And it's hard work. And what we know is that, again, some school districts, some teachers did it very, very well. We also know that even today, there are schools and districts that aren't aligned with our old frameworks, let alone our new ones. So we know that that's the work that's ahead of us. So building on these opportunities, we know we have challenges. We hope to address those challenges in our Race to the Top application by saying we're going to help create model curriculum for districts so that that teachers, educators, regardless of where you are in the state, where if you're in a rural area or a suburban area or an urban area, you've got at least a place to start, a model to look at. Our goal is to take the work that we know that's happening across the state and use educators to help us refine those models. So not starting over, really respecting the good work that teachers, educators, administrators have already completed in this state, and moving that forward to helping us align to the new standards. We know that's a challenge. Putting all these, we've got over 250 educators from across the state that have said, yes, we want to be a part of these curriculum development committees. Being able to put us all on the same page and recalibrate us, that's a challenge, but one that we know we absolutely have to do, and we have to start immediately, starting next month, 2 months, in April. We'll be starting that recalibration process with teachers. We know that we have populations, English language learners and students with special needs, that we need to specifically address. Ideally, these model curriculum units will give teachers specific measures, specific instructional strategies, ideas about resources, materials that they can use to address the needs of these population of students that's so important. Again, a huge challenge for us. It's a big job, and we know there are lots of challenges out there, and we know that there are teachers that are aware and have their finger right on the pulse of what's happening, and then we know there are teachers that aren't aware. One of the things that we're working in collaboration with institutes of higher ed at the readiness centers that are located around the state is exactly what Karene talked about, is having opportunities for teachers to come to half-day sessions to say, what are these new standards about? Building that awareness, designing activities, a process for teachers to kind of roll up their sleeves with a team from their district and say, this is what this would look like in my class, beginning to become familiar with these standards and the differences from our previous standards. So on the ESC website, hopefully later on today, we will have the dates of those Readiness Center events and the times, the locations, and there'll be a registration coming out for district leaders to be able to bring a team of teachers with them. So we know that we have challenges around disseminating this information. We know it's an aggressive timeline, but we know that if we don't set an aggressive timeline, it won't get done. And we need to make sure that our students have every opportunity to learn the information that's identified in the standards, and that if they don't get it the first time, that there's a chance for them to get it a second time through that content. So lots of work ahead of us, but very exciting work. And I think for those of us at the department, we know that we have to work in collaboration with districts, with teachers, with all the forces that Jeff lists there, that's developing model curriculum. We know that we need to be aware of all of that and work together to make that happen for our children.
Thank you very much to all of the panelists. And now just a short moment of housekeeping. The proceeding today is actually being video recorded, and it will be posted on the website later for any educators and others who weren't able to be here today. And I don't have the clicker to advance to the next slide. Jeff does. There's contact information, and if anyone wants to tweet from your seat, the hashtag is Common Core. Okay, now we've heard some different perspectives. I'm going to ask some questions. Anyone on the panel, please feel free to jump in. And then after we have a couple rounds of questions, we'll open it up to the audience. The first question, how often do you believe that curriculum standards and assessments should change?
If I could start with the benefits of changing curriculum, as I mentioned before, I think anytime you have teachers in a room discussing the curriculum, talking about the difference between the taught curriculum and the written curriculum, talking about a guaranteed viable curriculum for everyone in the building, I think that's a good conversation. Now, having said that, I think change is difficult. I think change is very difficult for a lot of the teachers in my building. I think change universally is very difficult, and change can eat up a lot of time. I know that I share the concerns that everyone else at the table has about PD. I think that changing the curriculum, just absorbing the changes that are coming down, are going to be pretty difficult. And I think you've heard some concerns from this table. And I would argue that if our end result is to have better prepared students the day after graduation, I think that we should always, our goal should be always to fine-tune that curriculum to that end. Having said that, change is difficult.
If anyone wants to try to put some parameters on this, every 30 years, every 10 years, I'm just...
So I would just say that if the standards are constant, and you know, we've got a good set of standards. What we know about making changes in classrooms is that that's a 5 to 7 year process. So if we spend the next 3 or 4 years modifying our curriculum to align to these standards, then we need to give students the opportunity to move through that. So I think there's a revision process, but is it a wholesale revision? I would argue no, that isn't, but it's the benefit of those conversations that teachers have when they come and they say, you know what, because we're aligned, because our curriculum is aligned, what we're doing is we're seeing students come to us in 5th grade or 8th grade or 10th grade that are better prepared. We're not having to go back and reteach or plan for cover a gap that was missed because we're more aligned. So those conversations then is, if you've got students that are coming to you better prepared, then what do we need to do to tighten up that those curriculum areas, and what do we need to do to help students that maybe need a little extra support or need differentiation? Our students that are, not just our students that are maybe not achieving at that level, but our students that are achieving higher. How do we stretch them? So I would say that the revision process, you would want to have in place a process that looked at like every 4 or 5 years, a revision, but it wouldn't be a wholesale redo of curriculum, because the standards hopefully are and we know are good standards, so those are going to remain constant. It's the as students become more successful in addressing those standards, then we need to make modifications in that curriculum.
Any other, Karene-sean? I can't tell if you're just trying to hold yourself back.
The curricula, that's a political process. And superintendents decide what they want to purchase. So from a teacher's perspective, we would like stability. Please give us stability so we don't have to try to hit a moving target. If we could know that, okay, I'll take Pearson's, for example. Oh, we're using Pearson's. And we knew, okay, we're going to be able to use this same textbook for the next 5-10 years. Then that gives us a basis upon which to really build. And it's so important for PD also, and for supplemental materials, for us to know, yes, there's stability here. Does it mean that we have to have rigidity? No, of course not. Things do need to be modified, but I agree with Julia, it can't be a wholesale rewrite.
Okay. Another question is, in your daily responsibilities, what do you expect to change as a result of the state's adoption of the Common Core? And I'll start with you, Karene-sean.
For the classroom teacher, for me personally, there will be some changes, but not much. For the average classroom teacher, there's going to be a tremendous change. everything will change because your lesson now has to be in alignment with the Common Core. For those teachers who teach in a subject that is not an MCAS tested subject, and remember only 18% of us teach in an MCAS tested grade and subject. So for the vast majority of teachers, these literacy standards will be an enormous change. Enormous. And they will actually have to look and say, okay, hold on, reading and writing, literacy, in drama, in art. Well, how do we do that? And so professional development will be critical.
Any other of the panelists, what of your day-to-day responsibilities may change as a result of the Common Core state standards?
I'm not sure that it's my own daily, day-to-day responsibilities that will change. From the assistant superintendent perspective, I don't think that I'll have my finger right on the handle of exactly what's going on, but every interaction I have with a district level director or a principal will be different as a result of this than it was before. And the work that we do, particularly around teacher evaluation and observation, is going to change drastically as a result of the new standards. When we go into classrooms and look at what teachers are teaching and how they're teaching it, it's going to be strongly informed by the new Massachusetts curriculum frameworks. And that's going to be a critical piece for me to get across to all of the administrators in the district.
Okay.
I think the only thing that I would like to add is that as a building principal, I think it would be my responsibility to fight some of the perceptions that this is, if we duck this wave, we'll go over. That this may not even come to reality, which is a conversation that's going on in my part of the state. I also would say, I would echo what Dianne has to say about supervision and evaluation. But before we get there, I need to communicate with my teachers through my department chairs and department meetings and faculty meetings about what they're expected to do, and spend some PD so that people have those conversations.
Mm-hmm. You've all alluded in one way or another to the timeline being a very aggressive timeline. What advice might you give to the state about helping districts, schools, and teachers help to meet this timeline?
I'm writing.
I think the flexibility is going to be very important, especially where MCAS and AYP are concerned. I think that one of the major concerns for districts is going to be, as Greg brought this up before, as the test changes, what does that do to our AYP status? And what does that do for students who are trying to graduate from high school? From the student perspective, if they miss the mark on some questions, it may not necessarily be their fault. It may be a curriculum implementation issue that the school or the district needs to work out. And if the state could reassure districts that you're cognizant of these issues and that you're going to take measures to ensure the student is always the one who comes out on top, then that would make everybody feel a lot better, I think.
I would agree. I would also place a premium on events like this, especially reaching down to the classroom level. I think inviting teachers, the practitioners, into these meetings to have a good back and forth about what this means for them and their classroom and their students is important. I think it would also be very helpful to get information out to school committees and parents who maybe are coming at this only through their administrators who attend events like this. I think they need to hear firsthand what's going to be happening in their districts.
From the classroom perspective, I think the state right now is in the process of redesigning the teacher evaluation memo, and through Teach Plus, I was part of a policy group that we wrote our own recommendation, our own proposal, and gave it to the state. But what's so important is every teacher is supposed to be evaluated. If the Common Core standards and how the teacher helps to implement the standard is in fact embedded within the new teacher evaluation form, then that's something that will cause teachers, even in non-tested subjects, to stop and pay attention to. And if the state communicates, not just on the website that only some teachers sometimes, but send a blast through the unions. I mean, the AFT has bought into the Common Core standards. Use the unions. They communicate with teachers on a weekly basis, sometimes on a daily basis. Use them to really get the information out in a positive light, that this is not something that's being done to us, but this is something that we are a part of. And then make us a part of it. Include the teacher's voice.
I'd like to turn the question around a little bit. What do members of the panel think that superintendents could do to help roll this out? What will be the district's responsibility in terms of dealing with the aggressive timeline?
I think I'm repeating myself, and I'm repeating people on the panel, that we need to allow for more time during the school day to discuss this. So PD has to be a priority in implementing the new standards, and I think also some openness to exploring other resources for textbooks, for materials, for supplemental materials. I think they need to be prepared for that as they submit their budgets to the school committee. But I think time is the greatest gift in implementing this, and I think opening up some time, and I know that districts plan their PD well in advance. I think maybe taking another look at whatever they have planned and making sure that they spend some time on this topic.
I know in Boston that Dr. Johnson is going to be convening all of the principals. I believe it's at it will now be sometime in June. And that their focus will be, in fact, implementation of the Common Core standards district-wide. That having been said, that'll be in June, and the teachers will be gone. So part of...
There have been so many snow days, the teachers might still be here.
But as of July 1st, everything's over. So I think part of what I would suggest for any superintendent is to think about calling back teachers, or at least groups of teachers, in August and say, okay, look, here it is. This is what we've learned. This is what's going on. I mean, they're leaders in the district. And having the teachers there with principals and other administrators from the district level, having meetings in August to say, okay, this is rolling out, and it's rolling out really aggressively. How can we make this work? Not just, well, what are the problems, but, you know, how can we actually get it done? Because there's a capacity issue at the district level. Everyone knows this. But there's also, I think, an untapped resource of these master teachers who would be probably more than willing to step in and help.
Julia, any comments from the state point of view?
As to what superintendents could do?
Mm-hmm.
So I would concur with Greg. I think building in time. So looking at the ways in which you schedule that time and how you use that time. Every superintendent has an opening day meeting. Every building principal has an opening day meeting. But really making sure that in all your communications as a district leader, that you talk about, you stress the importance of the implementation of the new standards, what that looks like for curriculum development, what that looks like for professional development, what that looks like for assessment. So making that the priority so that that message is consistent through all that you do in your day. I think that's where a superintendent and district leadership could really build support around that, is for there to be a consistent message that the business we're about is student learning and instruction. And having walked for a few years in those assistant superintendent shoes, that message is easier at some times of the year than others when budgets are being cut, and it's hard to always continue that message. But even in those times, making those decisions around, you know, we know we have less money, we know we have fewer resources, but how can we continue to meet the needs of students? Being consistent with that message, I think, is something that could really help.
You've all talked about the responsibilities that are intrinsic to individuals who occupy the roles that you have. And it certainly sounds from what you have been describing and from what Jeff has been describing that everyone is owning some responsibility here. Is there anyone who is not yet owning some responsibility for implementing the standards? Are there other people who, other stakeholders who could be constructive in helping to implement the Common Core standards?
I don't really know whether they are or not, but I'm just going to say that we need to engage our universities and colleges that are preparing teachers, preparing future teachers, and make sure that they are very much involved in the Common Core and all of the processes that we're going through. So I'm sure that they are aware and that they're engaged on some level. I'm just not aware of it, so I just figured I'd put that out there.
And I don't think we can forget our parents and our parent groups. I mean, how we all know that children come to school at age 3, 4, or 5, and a lot's happened before they ever reach us. So I think our PTAs, our PTOs, those parent organizations, our faith organizations, there's a whole nother community of folks that we need to work in collaboration with, and not make an assumption that they are or aren't involved, but we need to be very deliberate in that involvement.
Okay.
If I could just add, I think it would be very helpful. I think too often in districts we try to recreate the wheel on our own. I think if superintendents could collaborate and pool resources and pool PD and attack this together as one. And I know in my part of the state that's not necessarily the case. I think we're all running around in different directions. I think if we could have some a united front so that we can be training together, I think that would certainly help my district, which is smaller and doesn't really have access to a lot of the resources that larger districts would have, but in order to for example, just in a concrete suggestion, to align PD days so that teachers could go to certain buildings, certain schools, because they're not far from each other, to focus on specific parts of this curriculum implementation, I think would be very helpful.
And if I can make a plug for technology, can we please utilize technology so that we can have webinars and people don't have to travel tremendous distances to be able to access this information? That would be really helpful.
Okay, I have one more question before we open it up, and that is, what will be the first sign that you see in your role that the Common Core standards have been implemented and are in a constructive and positive way?
Well, I'll jump in. I'm hoping that this time next year that we've got some model units that are aligned to the standards that teachers are piloting in classrooms and providing feedback, so that we will be able to post those on our ESE website and let folks know there are some models out there that they can try that hopefully will help student achievement.
From the classroom perspective, when the other teachers speak in the language of the standards, when we're discussing students, it's not just, well, what did he or she do, but it's what did he or she learn, and how do I know that that student learned that information? So for me, it's when the data aligns to the discussion. That's when I'm going to know, okay, we've done it.
I think when all of my seniors, when they're freshmen in college, they're meeting the expectations of their freshman college teachers. And I think that when they no longer have to come back and tell me that they're in a remedial math course or a remedial college writing course, I think I know at that point we're starting to hit the target. I also think when our school to career coordinator starts getting feedback from some of the outplacements from employers saying, you know what, I think I see a real difference here, and I think these kids are ready for the world of work, I think then I know we're hitting our mark.
I think I would just echo what Karen and Gregory both said.